My number one job is make sure we protect the people of Ontario. I need to protect the communities against that tyrant south of the border, which drives me absolutely nuts.
Fighting words from Ontario's Doug Ford after auto jobs leave his province for the U.S. But other premiers say key industries in their provinces need backup from the rest of Canada. I'm Catherine Cullen, and this week on The House, Ontario's man in Washington on whether the fight to save auto jobs is fair to the rest of the country and why he hopes we could be close to a deal on some tariffs. Plus, Mark Carney's new plan to fight crime. Will it get the job done? And the fallout after Pierre Poilievre calls top Mounties despicable. Our political strategist panel is here to talk about it all. Also, he's been Vancouver's mayor, BC's chief coroner, and a senator. Now, Larry Campbell has a new job, trying to improve Vancouver's Downtown Eastside, a place long racked by poverty, homelessness, and drug deaths. Where does he see hope for change? But first, as Trump's tariffs risk thousands more auto jobs, is Team Canada teetering? The House is now in session. It was a rough week in the Canada-U.S. trade war. On Tuesday, additional U.S. lumber tariffs came into effect, meaning Canadian softwood now faces a 45% hit. BC's Premier David Eby says the industry is at a tipping point, and he wants more attention for his province, like getting the money in a $1 billion federal aid package moving urgently.
When steelworkers in Ontario, when their jobs are in trouble, when their jobs are threatened, it's treated as a national emergency, and rightly so. And what we're asking for today is that same respect, that same concern, that same sense of emergency is shared for the forest sector in this country.
But the very next day, the auto sector took another hit. Stellantis announced it was moving Jeep Compass production to the U.S. Those 3,000 jobs were supposed to revive an idle plant in Brampton, Ontario. Premier Doug Ford said he was fed up and he was going to tell Prime Minister Carney as much in a private meeting.
That guy, President Trump, he's a real piece of work. You know something? What my message to the Prime Minister when I meet him on Thursday is if you can't get a deal, let's start hitting him back. Let's start hitting the U.S. back hard.
But the Prime Minister says right now he's not up for more counter tariffs or trade threats.
There's times to hit back and there's times to talk, and right now is the time to talk.
What's more, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan are all pressuring Carney to make a move that would help farmers, but likely hurt Ontario's auto sector. They want tariffs dropped on Chinese electric vehicles because they expect China will then drop its tariffs on Canadian pork and canola. But more Chinese EVs would likely mean fewer North American cars sold. And there's one more voice weighing in, Jean Chrétien. This week, I went to Shawinigan to speak with the former Prime Minister for an upcoming episode of The House. I asked Chrétien, given what Donald Trump has said about hating his enemies, using the U.S. justice system against them, his reliance on executive power, does Chrétien think Trump is a threat to democracy?
He is. He is. Because he does not care much about the rule of law. And the Western society is built on the rule of law. When there is no more rule of law, it's blackmail on a daily basis, and it's not working. So, how long it will last, he will not be there forever. And, there will be a price to pay for that. I don't know what will be the result. It could cause a lot of problems south of the border. This seems to run away from values that made the United States these days.
Our full conversation with Jean Chrétien in Shawinigan will be on an upcoming episode of The House and on The National. As for that question of how to manage all the conflicting interests within Canada on trade, on Friday, I spoke with David Paterson, Ontario's representative in Washington, D.C. Welcome to The House.
Thank you very much for having me.
Glad to have this conversation with you. If we look at this moment, though, Donald Trump has said Americans don't want to buy Canadian cars. His Commerce Secretary has reportedly told Canadians, and this is coming from the Toronto Star, quote, car assembly is going to be in America and there is nothing Canada can do about it. The question is, what is Canada going to do instead? It sounds pretty bleak, David. What do you think is the best case scenario Canada can get from the U.S. right now on cars?
Well, I think, first of all, I was actually there in Toronto to hear Secretary Lutnick under Chatham House rules, but it's widely reported, and I think accurately, that we've had that. I think perhaps there is a degree, you'll be shocked to hear this, of bluster and hot air balloons being floated in the context of, what is an ongoing discussion, negotiation around these, particularly these sectoral tariffs, or as we call them, 232 tariffs. And so it would appear from what we're seeing that, obviously we're pleased that Prime Minister Carney has developed a great rapport. I think that is important for us looking at it from Washington, because the whole world does not have that kind of benefit. But they're going at what they can. We've heard that some progress is being made with regard to steel, aluminum. That's really a mystery in terms of why Americans put that on in the first place. It's almost a give to them to let them have it again. And then also some focus on energy, which is important if they value the energy from Alberta and the like. But
David, I'm just going to jump in here. I do very much want to talk about where the conversation is going writ large. But when it comes to cars, I hear you saying this is bluster. But it seems like they want to take as many auto jobs from Canada as possible. Is there anything you think Canada can do to change the Americans' mind on this?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not happening. And there's many reasons why that won't take place. And number one, I think all the American auto companies realize that that is something that they could not support. I'll give you three big reasons why we'll get through that and arrive at something. One is Canada is the biggest market in the world by a factor of 4 for exported American vehicles. We buy 23% of all the vehicles made for export in the United States. And now that they've moved to heavy trucks as well with a 232, Canada buys 75% of those exports. So that is tens of thousands of jobs in U.S. factories making those vehicles for export to Canada. Those companies do not want to lose that market. You turn your back on Canada, you're turning your back on not just 10% of the population that buys cars, but a big chunk of what you sell. Second reason is supply chain. We have a totally integrated supply chain on parts. They're duty-free at the moment. That was a lot of work Premier Ford and others did back in March, and we want to maintain that. But the whole supply chain in automotive seizes up if you try to unscramble the eggs, as Premier Ford would often say. So we need to move forward on that. The Americans know that. They need the things that we're producing to be able to make the vehicles in the United States, and they don't want to go back to what we saw in COVID. And then the third reason is the assets that American companies have sunk over 100 years into Canada. And having worked in in one of the major American automakers in Canada for 20 years, I can tell you that, the cost of turning your back on Canada in terms of environmental liabilities for your plant, the cost of the tariffs or remissions conditions on being able to bring your product in to sell to your dealers, the impact on your dealership network, none of that is economically possible, especially in a year of elections. So those are some reasons why we're going to get through this.
You point out that you come from the world of cars. You worked for GM for quite a long time. So with that context, I mean, you have British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, all saying in one way or another, the auto industry is getting an awful lot of attention, and it might well be coming at the expense of other sectors. What would you say to the rest of the country who thinks Ontario and auto workers just are getting an unfair amount of attention here?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, Ontario is deeply vested in protection of lumber and all kinds of other areas. There's no part of the country that has a broader set of impact from these industrial sectors. So we also very much need to have a forest products 232 deal, just like British Columbia. So agree on that 100%. I think that we like to sometimes overblow the differences in the regions. I work together very closely with Alberta and with Quebec and now Manitoba here in Washington. And, we need a deal for Canada. And but when you look at what Canada provides to the United States, it's energy and automotive as the two lead areas in terms of just the flow through of jobs in Ontario. So that's a big important thing for us.
Do these tensions worry you when you have, the Premier of Manitoba sort of saying this is Western Canada is being hit disproportionately here? Do you think that this could make the whole Team Canada thing a bit harder to pull off?
Well, I think the premiers have shown through the Council of Federation over the last year more in a sort of alignment and team spirit than I've seen in my lifetime. But you're not going to blame a premier for standing up for the major industries of their province. Of course they're going to do that, and I think they all understand that. I don't think we need to worry about that so much. I think what we need to worry about is us and the United States and Mexico, and make sure that as we go through this next year, and not just this year in getting these 232s, but next year you're going to have three things coming together at the same time. Supreme Court decisions, the midterms coming together, that'll be crazy, silly season in the United States, and the USMCA renegotiation. So this is a warm-up act. This is not the end of the game.
I do want to get to USMCA in a minute, but I want to talk a bit about how Ontario is handling this moment. The province launching a $75 million ad campaign using an old clip of Ronald Reagan talking about how bad tariffs can be. Why is that money better spent on those ads than being given directly to workers or businesses who are suffering under this trade war?
Well, today you cannot have success in terms of influencing in the United States without communication. Ontario's done that from the outset, and I can tell you as the person on the ground in Congress every day and meeting at the White House, that is very, very important. And these new ads will resonate extremely well with the Republicans in Congress. I have not had a bad meeting with a Republican in the last year. What they say to us, as the Premier says, is that we don't want to see tariffs on Canada. We respect that the president ran on this, and we'll let him run with this agenda. But as we get closer to next year, they want to protect those auto jobs in their states as well.
But none of them seem to be changing Donald Trump's mind. So if I'm a Canadian auto worker, I'm saying, okay, $75 million to, get under some Republican skin, but it doesn't seem to be changing my job prospects.
Yeah, but keep in mind, Catherine, that next year, when the USMCA comes, Congress gets back into the game. You can't amend the USMCA without Congress. You certainly couldn't cancel it without Congress. And if you wanted to split it up or change things and deal with some of the issues that we see coming down, which are a really important part of the future, Congress will be involved. And so the work that we're doing now with Congress, with advertising, with communication, the Premier of Ontario is the most well-known Canadian in the United States. He's on every cable network on a regular basis. And we don't spend a week without one or two calls with members of Congress or governors across the United States. And so that's important. It's laying the groundwork. And these are all people that are speaking into the ear of President Trump. And I have to add, those voices, those debates that we're having in Canada, not a lot of that gets heard here in Washington. But what does get heard is Premier Ford and the advertising. So that helps.
When it comes to these sector-specific negotiations that are happening between the federal government and U.S. officials, what is your sense of how close the two sides could be to a deal on something?
Well, I hope they're very close. We've wanted to see this back into July. And as I say, I think there's a sense that some progress may be made on steel, aluminum, and perhaps adding to that some energy.
And is that Keystone XL, or is it your sense that there's something bigger than that?
I sense it is. Yeah, I sense it is. And if that's the case, that's a first bite at the elephant. But we can't do this by timbits. We've got to make sure that we get at all of these 232s. And we need, in the self-interest of the United States, if nothing else, to make sure we get at both automotive and lumber, and then about a dozen different 232s that are coming down the pike, from everything from pharmaceuticals to movies. So this is a big challenge. We need to keep our eye on all these things, and we need to be able to fight back if we're not making progress.
When it comes to this CUSMA renewal process that's getting underway, CUSMA has done a lot to protect Canada from some of these tariffs. I wonder whether you see a scenario, and I know you want to focus on the positive here, but is there a risk where Trump basically pulls the rug out from under us, that we lose a lot of these tariff protections that we have right now under CUSMA?
Yeah, well, you may remember that back when in Trump 1, he threatened to cancel the USMCA. I think there's a good likelihood he'll threaten to do that again. And we shouldn't freak out over that. He can't really do all those things without Congress. It just creates a burning platform. And we should be confident. We have an awful lot that they need. And there's a lot of that, such as critical minerals, our energy, and all the different, everything from potash to nickel, that you can't run the U.S. economy without. So we can be our own worst enemy if we worry too much, but we got to be tough, and we've got to not back down. And we will make sure that we continue to make that fight happen every day here in Washington.
You say we've got to be tough. Do you think in the future that is going to involve some kind of retaliation? The Prime Minister was pretty clear this week that this isn't the moment for it, but Ontario's Premier sure sounds like he's getting close.
Well, part of the whole purpose of all that advertising and all the work that we do right now is to make Americans aware of what you could do. And, we need to do this together. Otherwise, you're throwing us into the arms of the Chinese and doing all kinds of things that you don't want to see in the United States. So let's do this together. That's the message. But Canada has any number of different retaliatory options that are ahead of us if we need them. We hope we don't. In the meantime, we're building our own economy stronger back in Canada. So that's the plan. We just need to keep focused on it.
David Paterson, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Catherine.
David Paterson is Ontario's representative in Washington, D.C. So, the trade war continues to bubble, while Mark Carney sets up a plan to get tougher on crime, and Pierre Poilievre calls the RCMP leadership despicable. To dig into it all, we've assembled our strategist panel. Marcy Serks is former senior advisor to Justin Trudeau, now chief strategy officer at Compass Rose. Kate Harrison, conservative strategist and vice chair at Summa Strategies. And Jordan Leichnitz is an NDP strategist and Canada director at the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Welcome to the House, everybody.
It's great to be back.
There. Thanks for having us.
Okay, we are going to start on trade. I want to take the temperature of the room right now. David Paterson didn't seem terribly worried about Canadian unity, I guess. But Marcy, I'll start with you. All these provinces are issuing their own demands to Mark Carney. Do you think Team Canada is on shaky footing right now?
I do. I think there is. I think it's tenuous for the government of Canada to be negotiating at this level with this cadence of negotiation, and we understand that they are actually closer to some form of deal, possibly, within weeks. I do think it is dangerous for the Federation to be speaking out of turn in the way in which it is. It's not necessarily that there's a U.S. strategy to divide and conquer, but we can be divided and conquer ourselves in this moment, and so I would submit that the government of Canada needs to be as focused right now on the federal family, keeping everybody singing from the same songbook to the extent possible in order to get this negotiation over the line with the Americans. So it should be as high a priority as being in D.C., should be being, just tearing up the phone lines to every provincial capital right now with the same gusto.
Kate, David Paterson said it's normal for premiers to be fighting for their provinces. It's just how things work. Marcy obviously sees it differently. What do you think?
Well, it is. Of course it is.
Yeah.
But this is a different negotiation from any we've had previously. This is not a traditional negotiation, so it's less helpful than it's been in the past.
Kate?
Mark Carney is a man. He is not a miracle worker, and it seems really unlikely to me that the Team Canada approach is going to hold, where we have Quebec fighting for supply management and aluminum, Ontario fighting for steel and auto, and Alberta looking to secure more energy exports, including to the U.S. So I think we're dreaming in Technicolor a bit to think that all of those parties are going to be satisfied at the end of this agreement. I do think, though, Catherine, we're seeing in real time what the failure to advance CUSMA renegotiation is meaning for jobs. The head of Stellantis effectively confirmed to the Prime Minister that there wouldn't be movement to replace that Jeep Compass facility with a new model until CUSMA had been renegotiated, which is all the more reason why we should be looking to expedite an agreement. We haven't seen that happen so far, and we're seeing the consequence of that in terms of job losses, as well as, I think, a bit of clever politicking on the part of the Liberal government to have their cake and eat it too, with a spendy budget coming up and no real trade progress in the interim, so that they can justify a pretty big check on November 4th.
Jordan?
Well, I mean, the Prime Minister has some real problems, I think. And some of this goes down to the high expectations that he himself set out in the early days of his tenure about how quickly an agreement was going to be reached and the deadlines that he himself set, which have since been blown past. And the reality is that we're now closing in on 6 months. And not only are we not better off, we're actually worse off. There's more tariffs in place. So the challenge for the Prime Minister, I think, is you've got two things happening. At the same time as we're not seeing that progress, you have provincial premiers who are rightly concerned about industries in their regions being impacted. We are seeing job losses. And, to add to Kate's point there, unemployment's topping 10% in Windsor right now. These are very, very real impacts that we're seeing. And so you are seeing that, but you're also seeing less information sharing now coming from the Prime Minister, coming from the federal government to key stakeholders like premiers, like business leaders, like labor leaders, and also to the Canadian public. So it's clear that there is something on the table in this negotiation with the United States. And because the U.S. is pushing us into a sector-by-sector side deal strategy, the question becomes what's going to be on the altar. There will be winners and losers in these negotiations. And one of the things the Prime Minister has really stopped doing is building a coalition along with him. So I do share a lot of Marcy's concern about the fragmentation that we're seeing, because I think that we're really seeing that support weaken as time goes on.
Yeah. Listen, this is not an issue that is going to be going away anytime soon, even if there are some of those sector-by-sector deals, and we are going to keep watching that. But another issue that the federal government is trying to sort out right now is its approach on bail reform. The Liberals are promising consecutive sentencing for serious crimes, harsher penalties for organized retail theft. They're hiring 1,000 more RCMP officers. Kate, the Conservatives have been hammering the Liberals on crime for months now. They've made this move. Do the Conservatives have to sort of change their approach now?
I don't know if it's a change in approach so much as it is working to improve the bill that is put forward. The Conservatives had their own private members bill that would see tougher sentences, that would see previous criminal history considered when examining major offenses. That was something that a lot of premiers actually applauded when the Conservatives put that forward. And I think the consensus on the Conservative part is that a lot of what's being proposed right now may fall short of that. So it's not to suggest that the bill can't be improved. And I think in the spirit of parliamentary cooperation, perhaps the government will actually entertain some amendment to strengthen that bill in line with what the Conservatives want to see, in line with what law enforcement is calling for, and in line with what premiers are calling for. So I think the ball is actually back in the Prime Minister's court and the government's court in terms of trying to make something work that appeases these parties and actually delivers justice for a lot of Canadians that are dissatisfied with the current system.
Marcy, I'm particularly interested to get your take here because, of course, you know the public safety file well. You were chief of staff at one point. The Liberals have been wrestling with this issue of bail reform and crime for years and years. Why is it so hard for the Liberals to get their hands around this one?
Yeah, I mean, for decades, actually, Catherine, and we have seen ebbs and flows. The pendulum swings one way or the other, depending on who the leader is at different times. I would share a lot of what Kate put forward. I actually do think this is the kind of legislation that should be considered across party lines. Crime and security is an issue that is transcendent. We know from public polling, anecdotal evidence, Canadians care a lot about this. The Liberal Party has had a weaker flank on these issues historically, so this is Mr. Carney moving in to shore it up as best as possible. The challenge that we always have with criminal justice legislation is that you're always trying to balance safety and security and punishment with the principles of natural justice. There is nothing that the government of Canada or any other subnational governments do to more impact the independence of an individual, their rights and freedoms, curtailing those, than bringing them before the justice system. So there is always that delicate dance. We will see the legislation when it is introduced in the House. I don't want to get ahead of that. Hopefully, there will be some form of dialogue between parties to get this right, to get the balance right. But there are many other issues confronting people. The boost in spending through the RCMP does matter in jurisdictions where the RCMP plays and is the police force. But it is also the issue we have many people waiting for their trials to even begin, waiting for it to even commence. We're not even at sentencing for people who are sitting in remand. So, there needs to be an investment across the whole of the system. Law enforcement is one element, won't fix everything. Sentencing, bail reform will not fix everything. This is a holistic conversation that I look forward to this Parliament having over the course of study of this bill.
Jordan, there was the bail reform announcement. On Friday, we saw the announcement about border officers. This is something we've been talking about for some time. I wonder how far you think the Liberals have gone in terms of trying to address their political vulnerability on these issues.
Well, I think they've gone right into the Conservatives' lunchroom and are snacking off the table. They're eating the Conservatives' proposals on bail reform specifically in a way that I think makes a lot of sense for them as they're in a minority government. And, I think you can read this as well as a little bit of insurance on their part. There is, of course, always a risk that we end up in an early election. And we know that for the Liberals, their weakness on crime was something that cost them seats in the GTA, particularly in the Peel region. So I think that what you're seeing here is an attempt for them to take this off the table early on. But of course, this is like another area where we're not seeing a lot of daylight between the Conservatives and Prime Minister Carney. And I think just to build on what Kate and Marcy have said, and I hope that this is a thorough discussion because there are material things that can be done to improve public safety through changes to bail conditions, but it's not the whole picture. And a lot of this also has to do with what resources are deployed at the provincial level, things like Crown prosecutors. And as Marcy said, the number of people who are in remand in Ontario, that's about 80% of the prison population. So, we can have this discussion, but it's not necessarily going to get at the heart of the issue unless it's a little bit more fulsome.
Okay. Kate, this is about the RCMP, not so much about, well, I suppose this is the question, the extent to which this is about crime, our next topic. Pierre Poilievre made some comments on a podcast where he accused RCMP leadership of covering up for Justin Trudeau. He named the SNC-Lavalin affair as well as Justin Trudeau's vacation to the Aga Khan's Island. He said there should have been criminal charges in those instances, but, quote, the leadership of the RCMP is frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government. Kate, is he not running a pretty serious risk when he calls out the leadership of Canada's National Police Force without providing any evidence of wrongdoing by the police? It's a serious allegation.
Part of the issue here is that we never really got to the bottom of the SNC-Lavalin scandal because the RCMP, by their admission, was not able to access a number of documents from the government that they felt would be necessary to make a determination in terms of whether or not to proceed with an investigation. I'm sure your listeners might also recall there was a committee meeting where the RCMP leadership was called to testify on this very matter, and that was shut down by the then Trudeau government members of that committee. So I will say that I think Mr. Poilievre needs to make good on the RCMP commissioner's offer to have a meeting. And now that he has put this out into the ecosystem, he should take them up on the offer to have a meeting. I do also think it's important for the Conservatives, though, Catherine, to not lose sight of the issues at hand that Canadians are expecting leadership on, that is on affordability and crime and immigration and all these things. And this could quickly become a bit of a sideshow if it's not effectively managed and take us off of the narrative that I think a lot of Canadians are looking to Conservatives for.
Yeah, I note what you're saying there, Kate, and I didn't hear a fulsome defense of Pierre Poilievre's comments. Jordan, I wonder what you think about this moment, this comment, and whether this is something we're still going to be talking about in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, this is wild. And I think that this is going to be directly clipped into attack ads against the Conservatives. And it really should be. You have Pierre Poilievre here absolutely echoing a lot of the rhetoric that we saw in the United States with Trump, for example, the lock her up rhetoric around Clinton. And this actually isn't even the first time that he's made comments like this. We saw a few weeks back where he was criticizing the sentences of those who were involved in the trucker convoy occupation here in Ottawa. So I think this is really puzzling strategically as well. So one of the reasons that the Conservatives were not able to win the last election is because there were a large number of Canadians who had concerns about how Trumpy Poilievre sounded. And here he is going again into that very same kind of rhetoric that we know has been a hard ceiling in his ability to grow his vote with many Canadians. So one possible explanation, of course, is that he's going into a leadership review vote in January. But I don't really think that that is the reason. There's not a lot of doubt that he's going to go through that leadership vote successfully. So that really leaves us with, this is his instinct. He enjoys doing this sort of thing. And that is really, frankly, unhelpful, unstrategic, and probably pretty embarrassing for a lot of Conservatives sitting in that caucus who don't like to hear this sort of thing from their leader. Marcy.
I agree with everything the others have said. This form of commentary is beneath the office that he holds as leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition. This demonstrates his base instinct, which is base. This is a very sharp divide from what he purported to be doing post-election, to be listening and hearing what a broader swath of the Canadian public want to hear on jobs, on crime.
I suppose you could say he does continue to talk about those things. Those are his bread and butter.
You talk about crime and law enforcement and at the same moment concurrently slight the national police force as we watch south of the border the instruments and tools of a democracy be used for political vindication. That is the road we are on. That is the kind of rhetoric he is feeding with this comment. He should retract it immediately and absolutely take a meeting and try to find some way forward. But I agree. I think Conservatives should be embarrassed by this kind of rhetoric. It is not what they stand for as a law enforcement party.
If I might just interject, the head of the RCMP is not on the ballot. Mark Carney is. And that is where the Conservatives need to keep their sights focused. So I think that one of the things that Conservatives did very well for a number of years is message discipline. I think that led to a lot of Poilievre's success. And so this need not be a distraction where I think a lot of people have generally moved on. And there's a lot of things that you can point to that the current government is fumbling the ball on. So Conservatives should stay focused on those things.
Okay, we are going to leave the conversation there. Thank you to all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Marcy Sirks, Kate Harrison, and Jordan Leichnitz. Lots more coming up on the House podcast. Meet the former cop turned chief coroner turned mayor turned senator who's now trying to make Vancouver's Downtown Eastside better. I'm Catherine Cullen. You're listening to The House, making politics make sense. Make sure to give us a follow so you never miss an episode, and tell us what you think of the show. You can email us at thehouse@cbc.ca. Every day in Vancouver's Downtown Eastside, people struggle with drug addiction, mental health challenges, poverty, and homelessness. My next guest has been tasked with trying to make some improvements. Larry Campbell knows Vancouver well. He was once mayor, he was BC's chief coroner, and is a former Canadian senator. Recently, he became BC's Downtown Eastside provincial advisor. Larry Campbell, hello.
Good morning.
You decided that you wanted to do something to help in the Downtown Eastside when you walked the neighborhood. And what you saw, you said, left you weeping. What was it you saw that day?
I saw despair. I saw people with illnesses that should be treated. I saw the general disarray of an area that, I started working there in 1973 with the RCMP drug squad. To see it go from virtually no homeless on the street to the situation that it was just, it broke my heart.
And so much so that you felt you could and should do something.
Well, not exactly. What in fact happened is I phoned the Minister of Community Safety, who I knew from when he was a police officer, and he Zoomed me and allowed me to rant for basically a half an hour at which point I felt much better, very cathartic. And we talked about it because he'd been a police officer there. And that really was my involvement. And then the next day I got a call from the Premier's office, the special project director, and they wanted to talk more. We had a quite long discussion about, I don't have any answers, but what I'm trying to do is find a process for the downtown east side whereby people can come off of the street and services are available. And that includes for mental illness, that includes for the addictions and the homelessness. And I never thought it would be easy, but it's quite a challenge. I've been speaking to people down there for the last 2 weeks, literally daily. I met with 15 women's groups the other day, and it's amazing what's going on down there through these organizations. I mean, there are good stories in the downtown east side. There's lots of good stories, and there's lots of dedicated people.
Tell us one, Larry Campbell, because of course, like as I was saying off the top, I think when people across the country, if they have a mental image of the downtown east side, it is a place of struggle. So tell me a story you heard that gives you some hope.
I was down there, and I was introduced to a guy who had a pork pie hat on, like my old friend Jim Green, with welder goggles on it and horns coming out of it. And he had been a chef, and during COVID, he lost his job, and so he came to the downtown east side, and he probably feeds 500 to 600 people a day. And it was Truth and Reconciliation Day, and he held a barbecue on a vacant lot. He set up a barbecue. He gets food from Costco and all kinds of different places. And I was like moved because he was just there and he was happy and he was showing me what was going on, and people were coming to it. I mean, it's like every once in a while there's just like this burst of sunshine down there that you go, wow, you know, people really care down there. It's a place where the people that live there, they care about each other, but the struggles are overwhelming for them.
And so in the span of a 6-month contract, what's the best case scenario for you in terms of what you hope you can accomplish?
The best case scenario in 6 months would be that I could sort out the organizations that are down there and how they're attached to each other and how they work towards finding housing for people. I'm going to be spending literally 2 to 3 months just talking to people, writing down their ideas, seeing how one section works with another, because there are specialized areas. There's the Downtown Eastside Women's Organization, which is tremendous. There's Indigenous. There's just so many different organizations that are all trying to help. And at the street level, they're actually quite coordinated. I think that within 6 months, I should be able to see how they're coordinated and then see where we go from there.
I do want to ask you about this job in particular, because the post itself does have a history that has some controversy attached to it. The first person who was named to the job, former Ontario Attorney General Michael Bryant, was given a 6-month contract worth $150,000. There wasn't a lot of announcement around the fact that he had gotten the job, and ultimately he was terminated after a few months. You will be making $92,000 for this 6-month contract. How do you make sure there is value for money, especially when you're helping so many people who are living in poverty, who need money so badly?
Um, I can only try to make it better. And so, with regards to Michael Bryant, um, I think really, I've never met Michael Bryant, but I have a lot of respect for him. And I can tell you that on the street, the people they talked to, they thought he was really helping them. He got caught in a communications error or whatever. My money, they asked me, and I told them 184,000 a year because that's what I made as a senator, and I thought that's what I make. It wasn't, over the top. And all I can say is that I'm going to try my hardest to make a difference here, and I think I have a track record in different areas. Some would argue that it's mixed, and I would have to agree that it's mixed, but I'm never afraid of trying something, and I'm never afraid of admitting that it doesn't work and go on to something else. So all I can say is let's see where we are 6 months from now. There is no guarantee in life, that's for sure.
In closing, you were Vancouver's mayor when the first legal supervised injection site opened in 2003 in the Downtown Eastside. At the time, it was the first in Canada. We fast forward to now. Ontario has recently closed numerous supervised drug use sites. BC walked back a lot of its moves around decriminalization of simple possession. Why do you think the debate about the right approach is still so unsettled?
Well, first of all, if I'd have been smart when I was mayor, I'd have opened 15 sites. And the idea that closing them helps is simply wrong, because these sites could have been the entry point for addicts into detox and recovery. And that did happen at Insight. But what has really changed the game here is moving from heroin to fentanyl. Heroin I could deal with, and I mean, if you remember in '96, we declared an emergency. There was like 300 deaths. I would never ever have imagined that we would be having thousands of deaths. I just never would have imagined. So it's a whole different drug. The idea that you can put people in jail and get out of this is ludicrous. I mean, federal prison costs about $150,000 a year for a male and about $200,000 for a female. I can house people and treat them for literally pennies on that dollar. But we have to have the will to move forward. And we have to recognize that this is a medical issue and has to be dealt with it as a medical issue. Everything else has failed miserably.
It is a big topic and a big job you've got in front of you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us about it, Larry Campbell.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You have a good day now.
You as well. Larry Campbell is the Downtown Eastside Provincial Advisor for British Columbia.
This is Canada. No child should go to school hungry or sit in a classroom all day wondering where their next meal will come from. All our children should be focused on learning.
Even with cuts to government spending on the horizon, the Prime Minister says he is making Canada's national school food program permanent. The program was first announced by Justin Trudeau last year, committing $1 billion over 5 years. Since then, all provinces and territories have signed agreements with the federal government to improve their existing school food programs. So, is this program getting the job done? And as Mark Carney is carefully weighing his spending priorities, why is this making the list? Here to talk more about that is Debbie Field. She is the national coordinator at the nonprofit Coalition for Healthy School Food. Welcome back to the House.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, this decision to make the program permanent, how big a deal is this?
This is monumental. This is a generationally important decision that the government has made, and it will really literally change the future of Canadian society and the health and well-being of children for generations to come.
When the Prime Minister announced it, I found myself thinking, well, it would have been pretty tough politics to walk back a national school food program. But for folks who were on the inside of this, was there some anxiety about whether this was going to continue?
Tremendous anxiety. I spoke to you in the summer of 2023, and at that time we were, quote, cautiously optimistic, meaning we didn't think it was going to happen. So for a long time, the Trudeau government did not move on their promise. It took, they promised it in their pre-election statements, but it took a full 3 years to implement. And we were running out of time and bandwidth, and it certainly didn't look like we would get a national school food program. Then we got it, as you said. And then there was tremendous anxiety would the provinces sign. And in fact, it's so great to be here at the House and to talk to you and others who really care about the nitty-gritty of interprovincial territorial agreements. I think these agreements were signed faster than any other set of agreements in Canadian history. So they were all, but there was tremendous anxiety. They had to be signed by March 31st, and even, in the beginning of March, it did not look like Saskatchewan or Alberta would sign. So then we have those signing, but then, we have a potential election with the new Prime Minister of whichever political party continue the commitment. And the agreements were only for 3 years. One of the big news about Friday is the Prime Minister not only committed to year 4 and 5, but basically year 6. That there will be money there. Not enough money, and hopefully we can talk about why it's not enough money, but at least the commitment is there now.
Well, so let's talk about what is happening right now. I mean, one of the political criticisms of this, when it was announced, around the time it was announced, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said, this is about feeding bureaucracy. It's not about feeding kids. What are you able to tell us about what impact this program is having right now?
It's having a tremendous impact because the agreements were signed so quickly, and the government did honor their commitment that the funds would flow directly to the provinces and territories. So where Pierre Poilievre was wrong was there was no new bureaucracy set up at the federal government. Our coalition advocated for a very elegant, quick flow-through mechanism. All the provinces and territories have programs. The federal government just needs to cut them a check. The money goes there, and it's implemented. And that also honors the provincial and territorial responsibility over education. So no new bureaucracy, no hold-up. Money went. Kids, those provinces who signed quickly, the first 4 provinces had money within a month. They were able to spend it in that first year. Some of the holdouts, it took a little longer, and it took a little longer in the flow through, but they all got the money, and all the money started flowing immediately to programs. And what that meant was, again, not enough money, but at least those programs that were struggling, that had long waiting lists, that were serving, maybe a granola bar and a yogurt tube could now afford to buy a fresh apple and a piece of cheese. So it made a difference right away.
You say not enough money. The federal government has said it's going to be more than $216 million in annual funding that's going to begin in 2029. How far are we from hitting what you think the necessary mark is, Debbie?
Quite far. I mean, I think we just have to have people think about what food costs. I think when listeners are hearing a national school food program, what do they want? What do parents want? I think what we want as parents and grandparents and school administrators is children to eat a home-cooked meal from scratch with lots of great vegetables and fruits in them that will keep them learning well all day, improve their health, and improve their mental health. These school food programs have really been noted as reducing anxiety amongst children, and especially since COVID, we know what a big problem it is. But a meal like that costs $6.50. $200 million over the 5 years commitment, or the $216 million, or whatever this small number is only pennies a day. It's pennies a day, and it's not enough money for the food. The great news is provinces and territories have themselves really anteed in. So when I would have spoken to you, the average amount coming in from all the provinces and territories was about $200 million a year. Now it's $400 million. I think it'd be great if the federal government immediately matched what the provinces are doing, which would be $400 million. But eventually, it is actually going to cost billions to give us a quality program.
Well, it's interesting you make that argument for more money. The moment at which this is happening is, in fact, the one at which the federal government is trying to pull back on some government spending. And so I want to ask you in closing, as we get closer to this budget that is going to have some austerity in it, some cuts to government services, what would you say to Canadians about why this program deserves to be made permanent when they may be about to see cuts in other areas like foreign aid or Indigenous services?
Well, I certainly don't want to make it a competition for what needs to be cut, but there is no single investment that a government can make that is this relatively small, because even in the billions, that is a minute component of the federal budget. We are making expenditures all the time in the billions, and our children's health and well-being and their ability to strive and be educated and do well in a global economy is crucial. Where I think this gets into some of the visionary conversations that Prime Minister Carney is talking about is, what is the identity of Canada? A healing and good country that takes care of everyone, that is competitive, that knows that local food in schools is great for the local economy. The multitude benefits of this investment far outweigh the cost.
Debbie, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Debbie Field is the National Coordinator of the Coalition for Healthy School Food. Okay, that is it for us this week. Our crew on the house is Emma Godmere, Benjamin Lopez-Steven, Victoria Valito, and our senior producer this week is Kristen Everson. Technical production by Miguel Plant. I'm Catherine Cullen. Thank you so much for listening.